Mack Sennett's arch rival was Hal Roach, who late in the 20s unveiled an immortal team, Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy. Ironically, as individual comedians, Laurel and Hardy had been around since the movie's early days. Laurel had once starred, but had been reduced to featured player. Hardy had never risen above supporting roles. Then in 1927, they were accidentally paired, and almost overnight became the movie's most popular comedy team.
Today on this special bonus episode of the Laurel and Hardy podcast, I'm joined once again by classic comedy aficionado Chris Seguin, as I wanted to have one last look back at Stan and Babe's silent comedies before we turn away for good and move into the talkies. So welcome back, Chris.
Well, thank you, sir. It's good to be back, and it feels like a watershed moment to be going from the silence to the talkies. You've achieved phase one.
Phase one complete, yeah, absolutely. And I've got to say, I'm really excited to be moving into the talkies, but it's not with a little bit of, not reluctance is probably the wrong word, but I feel sad. I feel a little bit of a tinge of sadness to be turning my back on the silent films, because obviously that's where this podcast started. And I've met so many friends, I'd like to call them friends now, including yourself, Chris, through the silent films, and it's given me a much better appreciation of that period. I liked the silent films before, but you know, I much preferred the talkies, but I really do I've grown to love these silent films, and I think looking at the feedback, a lot of listeners have too. It is a really special time in the boys' career. I don't know if you agree with that, Chris.
I do, and it's funny because you were talking about missing the era, and that was something that Stan himself said, right? Like
yes,
he preferred the silence, and you know, they were always just done a disservice because they didn't have the opportunity to imprint on us. And I think for most people, unless they really kind of get introduced to Laurel and Hardy through the talkies and then pursue the silence through YouTube or whatever. I'm not talking about the real fans. I'm talking about people who are getting to know Laurel and Hardy. But I would say for most people, the introduction would be, you know, through TV and the classic films that you saw all the time. And the silence were just this other era. And I think the other problem is that I still know people who just won't watch a silent movie, which is absurd to me because there's so much art within that, right? And I think it speaks, the person who won't watch a silent movie just doesn't appreciate that it's just a movie, right? It's just a different form of language, and you're missing out on a lot of stuff. You're missing out on you know, the crowd, you know, the wind, you know, all of Chaplin's prime stuff, just, you know, Wings, you know, the amazing films, just because you know, they're not talking. It was funny, Dave Callett, who had All Day Entertainment, he put out a really nice Harry Langdon set a few years ago, a couple sets called American Slapstick, and he told me a story where he went in to get funding, and he was telling the woman at the bank what it was for, and she really didn't understand the notion of silent comedy, and he explained it to her, and she went, well, how is it a comedy if you can't hear people tell the jokes? so there's that. So I think, you know, it's actually kind of good that with this podcast, that you're doing it in chronological order.
Yeah.
You know, that you weren't doing a random thing where, we're going to talk about Way Out West and this week, and next week we're going to talk about the importance of derbies and all these things. Yeah. You know, we're taking you on this journey, and it's super interesting, and that's a thing. You know, even just watching Serge's new set to watch the growth over 1927. So I think, you know, kudos to you for bringing them to the forefront. You know, building a pretty large listener base who are learning about these things that they may not know about, and that your first book is going to be on the silence too.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, that just is my, you know, I have a very linear view of this. I couldn't do it sporadically, just pulling films here, there, and everywhere. I just had to do it in that chronological thing because it makes sense to me that way. But it also builds a narrative of what was happening in the boys' career and lives also. Very very much like how the boys wanted to film their pictures chronologically from start to finish. It just makes sense to me. But what I also hope, and I've noticed that the listener figures are going up all the time. We're attracting new listeners all the time to the podcast, which I'm thrilled about. But equally, I think as we move into the talkies, I think more people will start to come to that as well, because they are the films that they love, more so than the silence. And what I'd really love to be able to do is to sort of capture those people, and when they're waiting for the next episode, they might think, well, hang on, there's another 34 episodes I could listen to about the silence. Yeah. I'll just give that a go. And I know from feedback that when people listen to the episodes, they then want to go and watch the film. So fingers crossed, that might be a doorway. It might be an introduction to the silent films for people that haven't yet discovered them. And what a treasure trove they have still to discover if that is the case. So I'm really excited to do this today. Just have one final blast at the silent films, and we'll have a stroll down memory lane. We'll just have a little walk through the films. We won't go into too much detail on each film because we have covered it. But I just wanted to have one last little stroll through a retrospective of the entire period and see where that takes us. If that's okay, Chris?
Let's do it. Let's go. Let's go strolling.
Laurel and Hardy. Step this way.
Come on, don't get it, Daddy. You're always fiddling around.
So, obviously, we started in 1921 with The Lucky Dog. Have you seen the extra footage of The Lucky Dog now on the new Blu-ray?
I have. Actually, I had seen that from John Crail in advance. He's one of the Dancing Cuckoos. And through connections, I got a chance to see it, and it was pretty spectacular because it does fill that gap.
It does.
Like it looked like Lucky Dog kind of went through a meat grinder for about a minute and a half.
Yes.
And then all this stuff was gone. So to have that gap filled was, it's not an eye opener in terms of it's just nice to have that film complete and to have it delivered just in time. To get onto the new Blu-ray set, because it would have been a shame if that didn't happen.
Yes.
Right. But I'll just take a moment to go. The Blu-ray set looks spectacular.
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to talk to you about it since it came out, but it's really, I got no problems with that whatsoever.
Yeah.
People might want to nitpick over a few things, a typo on a title card, or 7 frames of Viola Richard missing, that kind of thing. But for the most part, Surge and Lobster, Blackout Films did a fantastic job. So shout out to everyone there.
Yes.
And it's a great way to go into, and just because all the early films are really fresh with me right now.
Yes.
It's I can go into this conversation maybe a little bit more informed than I might.
That's a good point. It was almost as if we planned it.
Almost.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So
I haven't planned anything about this. So.
Well, neither have I, so that's okay. That's all Excellent. Good. So we moved from The Lucky Dog, and obviously 45 Minutes from Hollywood is not my favorite film. I have to say, it's not one that I revisit very often, although I did watch it the other day on the Blu-ray. And it does look pretty spectacular on the Blu-ray as well, which is great. It does tell an interesting story about the Hal Roach Studios, though, as obviously it's a Glenn Tryon film where Stan and Babe are still kind of in the background. And this is Roach's attempt at trying to get Glenn Tryon as the new Harold Lloyd. I mean, that was never going to work, was it? To be fair.
No, although Glenn Tryon's really charming in a film called Lonesome.
Okay.
If you have a chance to see that, it's very late silent. I believe I'm going to pronounce the director's name wrong. It's Universal feature directed by Paul Feo, but it's very Harold Lloyd. It's like almost a tragic Harold Lloyd story. I'm going off on a course for a second, where he's a lonely office worker in a big city, like a small town boy. He's moved to the big city. He's lonesome. The film's called Lonesome. He meets a girl at I think Coney Island. who, is also lonesome. So she's gone. And so they have a day together and a spectacular day, but then something happens where they're separated and he can't find her, right? Because it's pre-cell phone, it's pre-everything, right? And he goes back to his lonesome apartment and he's heartbroken. I won't give the ending away, but it's just it's a gorgeous film. It captures great footage of Coney Island, and he's really, really good in it, right?
That's interesting.
And I think the problem is with him in 45 Minutes from Hollywood and the other ones I've seen, like Along Came Auntie, like I think he's just not made for what he was asked to do.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
and
agreed.
And I think it's a bit telling about what Roach was kind of struggling a little bit before Laurel and Hardy came along too, right? Like you think of that really key, and we'll get to this, that really core time in the Roach timeline where you had Max Davidson, you had Laurel and Hardy, you had Charlie Chase, you had Our Gang, really, and all those shorts are really, really strong, right?
Yeah.
But then before that, he had the Spat Family.
Yeah.
And the Dippy Doodads and these things, right? And so Chase and Our Gang were always strong, but it's one of those things. As you look back on the silent era of comedy, you like to think that everything's spectacular.
Yeah,
it's not.
No.
The cream rose to the top.
Yeah,
and there's a thing too with there's a whole little bit with Stan and Babe before they were on film together, where Stan was directing.
Yeah.
Babe in films and things like that, and starting to bring his influence into it.
Yes, it's a good point actually, because I mean that whole period of sort of post Lucky Dog and kind of the road to Roach, if you like, is quite a fascinating little period. And what really interests me, so you've got Stan there who's doing his solo work at Roach. So Roach kind of steps in and almost gives him his break, if you like, gets him out of vaudeville, filling in for Toto, trying to fill in those films that he's got to make. But then he's let go from Roach. Because Stan's got all this baggage with May, and just too much hassle. I think Stan's turning to drink because he's struggling to cope with the pressures of May. And then his good old mate Percy Pembroke comes along and introduces him to Joe Rock. And Joe Rock is this kind of like savior. So he brings him in, he takes him off vaudeville, and they manage to then start making films. And it looks like it's getting some traction. And then of course the rug gets pulled out because he's made his films in about 7 months or something, and he's got no work for the rest of the year. So he's really on his uppers again. And then he gets another chance from Roach, and he goes off, and he's the writer-director then, of course, and he goes to Roach's writer-director because Joe Rock doesn't want him to be in front of the cameras because it gives the game away that he's pocketed the money for 12 months worth and all the rest of it. And then Rock sues Stan for a period in front of the camera. Roach countersues Rock, freezes his assets. The whole thing is dropped, and we go on happily, and Stan starts to build from there as an actor. And then equally, you get Babe on the other side of things. He comes across from Jacksonville into California. It's going great, playing alongside Jimmy Aubrey, and he's got 5 years with Larry Seaman, including The Wizard of Oz. But let's not mention that one.
boy, that's a film I want to throw up on a big screen in front of an audience one day.
But then things seem to be going great for Babe, but then Babe starts struggling with gambling addictions. And then who comes to Babe's aid but Joe Rock? He brings him on board and gets him out of trouble, lends him cash, and gets him on the straight and narrow again. And then Babe ends up at Roach, and it's just a really interesting sort of juxtaposition. These two guys coming from totally different places, thrown together, will end up together, and their little funnel they come through is Joe Rock. It's just interesting. I find it fascinating.
Yeah, it's funny because I'll just on a kind of a personal note, the industry I work in, which is advertising, you realize it's a large but small field, right? And every opportunity I've had is through specific connections, right? So everyone's kind of interconnected in certain ways. So definitely this idea that Joe Rock and Hal Roach are like the key players in that is an interesting one, and kind of not that surprising. You'd forgotten there, Stan actually had 3 gigs at Roach. He had 1918. He had 23, 24 when he was doing Killer Cure and all of those. And then he went to Rock. And for the life of me, two things. One is I can't remember, and Rob, you may edit this out later, and Rob Stone can correct it, and then you can say something. But I think it was Jess Robbins or Bronco Billy that was producing the series for Stan, where he did The Pest and The Egg and all of those, right?
Yeah.
And then he went to Roach. I'm not sure why that ended, except I know that they started doing, I think they just ran out of money because they did that really weird film called Mixed Nuts.
That's right. Yes, all the outtakes.
Where they took outtakes from like 1917.
Yeah.
And it's a hard film to watch, right? Because it's just like it jumps all over the place and the quality's all over the map. Yeah. And then Stan did his second tenure at Roach, and turned out some really, really nice stuff, right? And then including some of those great parodies that he carried over into the Joe Rock era, right? But it seems like Stan was always just a victim of other people running out of money too, right?
No, it's interesting stuff. I'm trying to remember. I think Jess Robbins was he only there for The Lucky Dog, and then did he go on?
May have been. It might have been Bronco Billy for the other.
I know. Interesting. Robbins did have a stint at Roach as well, because there's a great bit in Rob Stone's book, funnily enough, mentioning Rob, where he wrote like a 7-page letter to Warren Doan, the general manager, complaining about how the studios had messed with his films, and his name's got to go on that film, and you've released it when it wasn't ready. I could do an easy fix.
Okay.
And so he definitely ended up at Roach at some point, but then he kind of packed his bags and went off in disgust. I think Percy Pembroke, who was one of Stan's best friends at the time, I think he might have directed a few at Joe Rock, because he worked with him. Yeah, and then he ended up at Roach. So yeah, it's a really fascinating little period, actually, really, really fascinating. But by 1925, both of them end up at Roach, and then we get them in the All Stars stable, 45 Minutes from Hollywood, which, is a best moving on from that one as quick as possible. Babe is great in it. I think he's fantastic, and he really
Babe's
lifts
great
the
in
film.
Everything.
Yeah. But then we come. I mean, this is a pivotal film. Duck Soup is just.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's classic Stan and Ollie.
Yeah.
But to all intents and purposes, yes, they look slightly different, but I mean, fantastic film.
It's like they jumped ahead to Second 100 Years.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's, the characters aren't quite there, but if you look at, Second 100 Years, which was like a dozen years into their tenure together, or a dozen films, I should say.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's where it's almost there.
Yes.
Right. Not quite, Stan's a bit silly, that kind of thing, but it really is like shockingly a Laurel and Hardy film. So if you're talking about pivotal films in their career, that's the one, I think.
Yeah, I think if it was going to make if the whole chronology was going to make sense, I think you'd have Duck Soup, and then you'd forget the rest until Do Detectives Think, and then you'd forget the next one. You'd forget Flying Elephants, definitely. You'd put that way back after 45 minutes, and then you'd come straight into Second 100 Years, because they would just flow on. But we can't understand how on earth they let them go from Duck Soup and just let it drift off into the wilderness for about 8 films or something like that. Strange.
Yeah, and it's weird. I was just going to say something. One of the reasons I'd like to see Hats Off is because it's between Second 100 Years and there's Putting Pants in Phillip, but then the Battle of the Century. Yeah. Right? And the leap from them in Second 100 Years and Battle of the Century, 2 films later, it's like they're so gelled.
Yes.
In Battle of the Century, and so not quite there, right? And I would love to see just what the performance is like. Are they truly nailed?
Yes.
In Hats Off, or is there still a little bit of that Second 100 Years vibe in Stan's performances? The stills indicate that they're pure Laurel and Hardy.
It does.
But boy, that's one reason to see that one, because that, again, you're talking about your pivotal films. Yeah. Right. That would be. Besides Do Detectives Think, just for the costumes, that would be like, probably the. Yeah. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
No. It absolutely looks to be the pivotal moment. And you could kind of understand Pants on Phillip coming before Hats Off, after Second 100 Years, because the characters aren't quite there. They're there or thereabouts, but from Hats Off. They've got the costumes, they've got the derbies, they've got everything.
So far, so good. It wasn't so far. We just came across the street.
Ring the bell. It wasn't so far.
No, I mean, just going back a few films, you know, the Pathé releases, I think the more you watch them, there's always something to appreciate in there. You know, I mean, I've said many times, I love Sailors Beware. I think that's a really strong comedy. I think Stan is great in it, even though he's not, you know, the Stanley character, if you will. It's a lovely short with lots of laughs in it. And again, you know, you've got things like Love 'Em and Weep with Mae Bush and Finlayson, so that feels very, very familiar territory.
Oh, that's a terrific film.
Yeah.
I was going to say, the more I watched them when I was going over to Blu-ray, the more I thought how weak they are.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah, compared to the Roach output at the time, compared to Charlie Chase, compared to Our Gang, compared to Max Davidson.
Right. Okay.
So I think that, and you know, one of the challenges is not having those really likable characters at the core.
Yes.
Right. Max Davidson is a likable character. You had Leo McCarey driving that bus, so he had really strong guidance, and all the best series had really strong minds behind them. So Max Davidson Max Davidson had Leo McCarey, Our Gang with Bob McGowan, Charlie Chase himself, along with Leo McCarey, but it's just like no mother to guide them on these, these shorts, right? And you know, you'll see things like, let's say, for lack of a better phrase, with Love and Hisses, which is just this meandering thing, right? So again, I'm jumping around a little bit versus going kind of like film by film, but it's one of those things where you see those early ones like Slipping Wives, right? And Love 'Em and Weep, where they're based on the all-star, like Priscilla Dean Mae Bush, and that Mae Bush is the reason why Love 'Em and Weep is spectacular.
Yes, agreed.
Right, like you know, I don't know how much comedy other than her early Senate stuff she did before she became a has-been who would appear in a Hal Roach all-star thing, right? And she was, you know, working with Von Stroheim, but. Like she just eats up the scenery, you know, and she's pure Mae Bush at that point. And Finlayson is great in it. Stan is great in it. Yeah, Babe's in there. But anyone could have been in there. But just as this trio of Stan, Finlayson, and Mae Bush, it's like that's powerhouse. So that's kind of pivotal too, because it brings Mae Bush into the fold.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just a shame she disappears again for so many films, because we don't see her again, I think, till Unaccustomed as We Are. I don't think she's in again, is she?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you should talk about that film sometime in the future.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's not that far away. Only a few weeks.
No. But then she's got that voice. I mean, you know, she brings that Mae Bush voice to their first talkie.
It is great, and this is the thing. The talkies are going to be really exciting to look at, because all of the voices, I think, are just perfect. You know, there's not a single voice amongst, you know, all the stock company and everybody. They're just made for talkies, really. But we're running away with ourselves.
Well, I told you that was going to happen.
Wait a minute. There's no use getting excited. You're making a mountain out of a molehill.
Certainly, life isn't short enough.
So I would suggest Putting Pants on Philip. Now, that is, we sort of spoke about Hats Off. We can't really talk about Hats Off because we obviously nobody's seen it, but it looks to be pivotal. And then it moves to Putting Pants on Philip, which is a great comedy. I think it's a really strong short. And many people, obviously, Hal Roach and Stan themselves said this was the first Laurel and Hardy film. This was the first one. And where do you stand on that, Chris? Do you think that was the first Laurel and Hardy film, or?
I think it depends on a couple things. First of all, I'll go back and I'll say I think Do Detectives Think is closer to that.
Yeah.
Right. When I was a kid and collecting 8mm films, and if you got a copy of Do Detectives Think, you would go, okay, this is a Laurel and Hardy movie because they've got the costumes on, traditional garb, etc., except for Stan's hair. But it's those things where you go, when you look through the list, right? It's the first one since Duck Soup where they're actually a team.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Where they're working together, and they're working as the same. It's like if you took the characters from Duck Soup and you went, okay, you fought the forest fire, and now you went to detective school. Now you're detectives, right?
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
okay, and then it's those same characters versus Sailors Beware, Love and Hisses, where they're
yeah,
at odds with each other. Stan's playing more of the, the Fae character, that kind
yeah,
of thing. He still
yeah,
has, those characteristics right up until Putting Pipes on Philip, arguably,
yeah,
right? But
yeah,
Do Detectives Think is a super pivotal film.
yeah.
As for Putting Pants on Philip being the first Laurel and Hardy movie, I think I read Stan say somewhere, or I might have just surmised this, that I think it's the first one where they went, okay, we can't separate these guys and have them work with other people now,
Yeah.
right? So they're no longer all stars, right?
Yes.
The chemistry is there. We recognize that they're equals. Even in Second 100 Years, it was the comedy trio of Stan Laurel, Oliver Hardy, and Jimmy Finlayson, right?
Yeah.
Whereas here, it's like, okay, well, that's I think why Finlayson left pretty
Yes.
much right. I don't think he's in any films after Hats Off, right, for a long time.
No, I think is it Liberty's the first one he comes back. Yeah, he's missing
Yeah,
for
so
quite a while.
that's like a dozen films later, right? Just because
Yeah.
it's like, well, I'm done, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's really easy to go, yeah, Putting Pants on Philip to everyone's eyes. Roach, Leo McCarey, Stan, Babe, whoever. Yeah, this is it. Even though Hats Off, you would think, because that got so much promotion, right? That was really sold as Laurel and Hardy, not as the zany all stars.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you look at those three films in a row, which are Hats Off, Putting Pants on Philip, and Battle of the Century, that's just explosive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like that's a 1-2-3 punch of Laurel and Hardy amazingness, right?
Yes.
And if you were going to theaters at the time, that would be when your socks would be blown off.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
By going, I think it might not be, because you'd also be seeing, because they release them at different times. It's like you'd also be seeing flying elephants at the same time.
That's right.
But it's like what they did with those three films.
Yeah, it was a real turbo boost, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's them for the next 25 years.
So you were just talking about when you said that you seem to remember hearing somewhere that Putting Pants on Philip was like the first one where they say we've got to gel these two together. I think what it was. I think I use this in my essay in John McCabe's book. One of John McCabe's book, he mentions that where Stan and Roach recollected that this was the first film, the first Laurel and Hardy film. Prior to that, neither Stan nor Babe wanted to be part of a team. They were not comfortable with it. Stan wanted to try and still be a solo comedian if he could, and Babe was just not confident that he was going to be able to partner with Stan Laurel. So by the time they get to Putting Pants on Philip, McCabe says that this was the film where Stan realized that actually this was where he belonged. This was the team that he belonged with. He was better with Babe Hardy. He always knew that he was better with somebody else, I think, but finally,
he mentioned that, I think, in one of the books.
Yeah, this was the point where he thought, yes, I am part of a team. This is the way forward. So that I think that's why, to them, this was the first Laurel and Hardy film, because it was their actual realization that this is where we go from here. So everything else after that is definitely Laurel and Hardy. So that makes sense to me. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, if Stan hadn't figured out over the course of, from 45 Minutes at Hollywood to Sugar Daddies that he wasn't going anywhere as a solo comedian.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Then
exactly.
his hopes were maybe a little bit too high to resist the idea of pairing up with Babe. I never heard the thing about Babe being insecure, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, apparently, nights before the decision, I'm trying to think who told me this. It's definitely one of the episodes, but Babe was like pacing the room. Can I do this? Can I actually be a partner to Stan Laurel? Can I be a because obviously he's been quite happy to be a supporting comedian for hundreds of films. I mean, 200 odd comedies, but this was really something quite different, and I think it just kind of shook him a little bit.
That's really interesting, because they could have done a thing like Harry Lang did so many films with Vernon Dent, right? Where that, if you look at Saturday, we talked about this thing one of the first times we talked, Saturday Afternoon with Harry Langdon, they're doing a Laurel and Hardy film before Laurel and Hardy, right? So that thing was set, and arguably Babe could have fallen into that role, but we're glad he didn't. And it's interesting because he fulfills such a, like, first of all, it speaks, I think he must have had a lot of admiration for Stan. To go, can I step in and work with this man? Right, who crafts the gags, who drives the bus. He had done that with Seaman, right? But much more as a second fiddle. But Seaman obviously respected Babe a lot. I think Babe directed one of his films, one of the features, or co-directed, but that Babe would be fearful of it, and then just find that niche of okay, I'm gonna I'm not gonna be the control guy or necessarily the creative guy, but I'm going to be creative in terms of I bring my take on this character and my performance chops to it. Right. And, I'm glad, glad that nobody's egos or fear got in the way of this happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting as well. I remember talking to Rob Stone about this right back in episode 1, because I found this really fascinating, that we have this image of Babe Hardy in sort of in Laurel and Hardy lore, if you like, where he turned up for the day, he did his shoot, and he was off to the golf course, and he wasn't really interested in the filmmaking process beyond the action, which is absolutely right. But you kind of left feeling that it perhaps wasn't in his skill set or something, that he wasn't able to do that. Maybe he was just an actor, but actually, when you trace Babe's history back to even the Vim days, there was an article in one of the trade papers talking about Babe Hardy is now sort of, I think it was directing his own crew in the Vim studios, and it was talking about the Babe Hardy crew and this, and how he was really responsible in driving that unit forward, and that really amazed me, because that is not the image that I had of Babe Hardy. I thought he was just, and I say just, he was an actor who turned up, did his work, and that was the limit of his expertise. Not with no detriment to him as a person for that, but that just sort of showed me that actually he could do it. He could bring things to the table if he wanted to do. He could direct action if he needed to, but he was more than happy to let Stan just drive it, and he could sit back and to be honest, I think that probably suited him better.
Well, I think that might be the lore. It's an easier story to tell. Right. That Stan's the genius, and Babe's the guy who comes in and does his stuff and leaves. Right. I would imagine they must have had some really serious conversations about gags and things like that. It wouldn't just be Babe picking up a script at the beginning of the day and going, "Thanks for the script, Stan." Like I would imagine that, much as the way they're on screen, that there had to be a chemistry in terms of, not a Lennon and McCartney thing, but definitely a thing where they would talk about what the character should do. They must have been engaged far more. I think, Babe would get into, you direct on stage, right? Because you can't have 3 directors, right? Like you have the director, then you have Stan directing the director, Stan in the editing room, Stan driving the gag bus, but Babe must have been in with the gag man. I don't necessarily buy this idea that he couldn't, they held off all his shots, his exasperation shots till the end of the day so he could get to the golf course. Maybe to a point, but I like to think he was more engaged than
that's
that.
A nice story, isn't it? But I don't buy that. I really don't. I think maybe once or twice, but I think that's probably exactly.
I think he'd figure it out by, it's like, wait a second, you're holding off these shots until I'm really exasperated, aren't you?
Was ever thus.
Exactly. Yeah, I think Babe needs to have, and then you think about how much experience he had in films over Stan. He was in over 200 comedies, whereas Stan, he probably had, I don't know, 20 or something. I don't know. It was certainly a handful compared to what Babe was doing. So the amount of experience and the amount of gag knowledge that Babe would have had in his locker, he's not going to just think, you tell me what to do. I'm not going to chip anything in. I've got nothing to,
I was going to say, it also makes him just the consummate film actor too. That Babe knows how to work a camera. Probably like Chaplin can maybe work it up as well as he can. Babe knows how to work a camera.
The best, just the best. So so they move on, and they move on in some style from Putting Pants on Philip. And Battle of the Century is obviously a classic, and it's one of those films, I think, that people who don't know Laurel and Hardy all that well seem to know that pie fight.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing I picked up on Battle of the Century, though, was most people know it from that pie fight. That's what it's kind of famous for. It was the pie fight to end all pie fights. But actually, when that was filmed, when it was made, it was all about the boxing match. It was the Gene Tunney or Gene Dempsey.
Jack Dempsey, Gene Tunney, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
Tunney Dempsey. Let's just go with that.
I'm showing my boxing ignorance, but exactly. It was the Dempsey Tunney fight. You know, that was the big deal, and that was what that film was really known about. And now it's the pie fight. But what I loved about that, as well as a little aside, is how excited everybody was at the studio for this boxing match. Because obviously they were all, there was a lot of boxing fans. Leo McCary's father was a boxer, I think, and H.M. Walker was obviously a sports reporter originally. And Hal Roach loved his sports. So they were all, I think I was reading the papers again, and they were trying to get together a private plane that they were going to fly across, and all of them together, all the boys day out, to watch this fight. I don't know if it ever came about. I'd love to think that it did, because it sounds, like a real load of fun. But it was big news, that fight. Big news.
Mm-hmm. I know that fight was. I hadn't heard about them all going out there, though. That's like a funny story.
Yeah. It was certainly planned. It was planned. What do you think about Battle of the Century now that we've seen the extra reel? Did it add much for you?
Oh yeah, it was interesting because I saw that for the first. I was lucky. I got to see it for the first time on a big screen.
Oh wow!
Right. Because we showed it at the Toronto Silent Film Festival when it first came out, and it was, how often do you get to see some fresh Laurel and Hardy? I mean, we've been lucky with, we're talking, you and I were talking the other day about the telescope piece in the promotional film with the telescope. It's like, oh wow, or the the various foreign language versions. But to see this film come together and see like some really wonderful stuff, like this, all the stuff with the banana peel leading up to it, Stan getting bonked on the head and having that, giant bump on top of his head kind of thing.
That's right.
And just falling asleep. He does this Harry Langdon piece where he gets on the head and he just falls asleep. Right. It's just delightful. So I think it adds immeasurably to it.
Yeah.
It just, because a pie fight on its own is funny, but when you have it kind of led into it's and there was like lots of nice stuff in the pie fight too that wasn't there in the first place. It's just a better, because it's funny because I was watching when we're getting ready to talk about Angora Love. I watched the Robert Youngson version in Further Perils of Laurel and Hardy, and Youngson always did a great job, but he squeezed these things down to their essence, and just to give it more of that Laurel and Hardy timing with the pie fight too, a little bit more breathing room, a little bit more personality, really helped a lot. So, again, amazing that thing was hiding in plain sight for so long.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
And I'd love to know what happened to that other bit of footage with Eugene Pallette. Maybe that'll show up someday.
Yeah, it's got to somewhere, hasn't it? It's got to be somewhere, just to complete the picture. It would be lovely. In terms of characterization, this really is the final kind of piece, for them to actually set off on the right road. Putting Pants on Philip, as we said, was great, but they just weren't Stan and Ollie. But here, and I think for the rest of their careers, they are now Stan and Ollie. Yes, things will change. Certain things will, creep in.
Well, they always evolve, right? Like the characters evolve a lot over 15 years.
Yeah.
Like during the course of the Roach years. But except for Babe's eye makeup, you could put this anywhere in the chronology.
Babe's eye makeup. No, that is niche. That is really niche.
who's watched these movies too many times?
Who's the bigger nerd now? That's great. Babe's
I didn't know it was a competition. It's got really heavy eyeliner on there for some reason. But you could take Battle of the Century and put it in after, Should Merry Men Go Home, and it would make sense.
Yes.
Right? It wouldn't be jarring, right? Yeah. Whereas if you did that with Call of the Cuckoo, it would be. Yeah, that's just like, this is fully formed. This is it. And it's beautiful because they are a pair. I mean, Babe is the manager, Stan is the fighter. They have a reason to be together.
Yeah.
Right? They're equally important to the film.
Yeah.
Same with Putting Pants on Philip. They have reasons to be together. And after a while, those reasons to be together don't exist anymore. You know, you look at the next film.
Yeah.
I was going to talk about Leave 'Em Laughing, right? Which is the first rooming board, or rooming house short. Right?
Yes,
where they're
that's right.
sharing a bed in a rooming house, right?
Yeah.
Now in that film, there's no reason for them to be together.
Yeah.
They're just two
together.
guys sharing a bed, right? And I think that that makes that a pivotal film, right?
Yes, that's a good point.
All of a sudden, you know, it's not like, you know, Second 100 Years where they're sharing a jail cell or something like that. It's just like they're friends forever.
Yes.
At that point, right?
Yeah.
And they always have been. You know, there's a jarring moment in Unaccustomed to the Art when you know, Ollie says to Mae Bush, you know, why, I've known this boy for years. And you're going, how many years? How did you meet? You know, that's where my brain went with that. But yeah, it's like everything after that, you know, Finishing Touch, Soup to Nuts, You're Darn Tootin', they're just there together.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah, you don't need a reason. That's absolutely. And Leave 'Em Laughing, actually, that is a really pivotal film, because the MGM executives, they screened Leave 'Em Laughing and they were all hysterical. They thought it was the best thing ever. So from that point on, they were absolutely determined that Stan and Ollie were going to be, you know, together. Don't care what you think. These guys are it. You will build a team around these now, and that is it. Forget it. You know, that's a done deal. They were really, really overboard with praise for Leave 'Em Laughing. They thought it was fantastic. So, a real turning point for them in terms of the distributors, certainly.
Isn't that swell?
And then Finishing Touch, right after that. And now I love Finishing Touch. I've said this before many times.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's probably my favorite. If I had to choose an atoll, silent myself, I think Finishing Touch would be it, because I just love it. From the very first moment when they skip off that truck, there's everything about it is just adorable. I just love it to death. It's fantastic.
Adorable is a good word, but yeah, just the energy, right? Like, oh, we're gonna go about our day now. Right? Like it's weird because these two films, right, really set the tone for future films, like Leave 'Em Laughing, we all the boarding house ones, like Angora Love and Laughing Gravy and all those. The Chimp, They Go Boom.
Yeah,
and then the Finishing Touches, like you know, Busy Buddies and Toad in a Hole and Dirty Work.
Music Box,
right?
Yeah,
Music Box, exactly. So you know, it's that thing where they're almost kind of instantly finding things that will work for them going forward.
Yes,
right. It's going, you know, what if we do this? What if we do that? Right. So you have a lot of kind of really pivotal films happening at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you know, the thing with the Finishing Touch is it shows them and it shows us that actually they don't need a reason to be together. They don't need a plot. They just need a few props, and they will carry that film through to right to the end and just make you laugh. It doesn't matter, you know, they can just make you laugh with anything. And Randy's always said, you know, they are very good with props. Not everybody is, but Stan and Babe are always good with anything that was lying around. They could make you laugh with it. Just fantastic.
Well, exactly. Right. And I think if you were to compare this to like Smithy, or like, you know, that uses a lot, you know, Stan Solo that uses a lot of this, it'd be like night and day, right? I've never watched them, you know, back to back, but first of all, I think because you've got both of them using the props and you know, just playing off each other, right? Like Babe is a lot more interesting for Stan to play off than Finlayson in Smithy, right?
Yes.
You know, it's funny you're talking about props. Who else would do that thing in Going Bye-Bye where they have the posies in their hand for like a third of the film? They're holding this bouquet of flowers and passing in there. You don't even, like, I think it took like the 10th time I saw it before I noticed it, right? It's just like they never let go of those flowers.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just it's brilliant and so subtle. You know, so their use of props is
love
fantastic.
That. I think Harold Lloyd did that, didn't he, in Speedy? Was it Speedy? Speedy, when he had a bouquet of flowers he was going to take to, he had to deliver them to somebody, and then within seconds he had them trapped in that door and they got ripped off.
Yeah. But see, that's the difference, right? Like Harold Lloyd will do, like, there's your joke, right? It's just like flowers get destroyed. I haven't seen Speedy in a long time, so I might be getting it wrong, but he has the flowers, they get destroyed almost immediately.
It was pretty quick.
Yeah. Joke over. Laurel and Hardy stretch it for 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? And they get their legs ripped off and they're still holding the flowers.
Absolutely. You know? Yeah, absolutely.
There's everything from soup to nuts, folks. Come and get it.
Soup to Nuts, another pivotal film. Soup to Nuts, we have the face in the cake, and Leo McCarey shouts to Babe, "Slow, hold it, don't do anything, just slowly bring your face up and look at the camera." You know, and that is a massive trait for Babe to take on board and use again and again. Leo McCarey's influence on the boys, you know, from all this period, you just cannot underestimate how important he was to them. You know, he was just that style of comedy is just sewn through everything, isn't it? Weaves through everything that they do, and especially something like that, bringing the pace right down.
Well, yeah, because Leo McCarey really drove the bus at the Roach Studio. For, you know, he designed the Charlie Chase series. Right, that's totally personality driven. That kind of the moment he figured out that Laurel and Hardy worked better slowly than the Jackrabbit thing of Sailor Beware or something like that, or Flying Elephants. It's like, well, let's see what we can do. Let's make it real slow, right? And that's, you know, sometimes people complain that certain films, my personal favorite, Silent, is too slow, but you know that's why they work. You know, because it's personality and that's the way their brains acted. Right, like, you know, if Babe's gonna fall into a giant cake, he's not gonna get up and go. Whoa. He's gonna go. Okay, this again. You know.
And we talk about pivotal moments and pivotal things happening. You know, Leo McCarey coming into the boys' lives and the boys' career. Again, really pivotal, because obviously he took over from F. Richard Jones when he left the studio, and Jones was hailed as this, you know, genius. He was actually described as a genius in film. I would have been fascinated to know where he would have taken the characters, if they would have taken the character, because obviously McCarey was the one that actually allegedly brought them together and sort of pushed them together as a team. You know, if that hadn't have happened, what would have happened to Stan and Ollie? Would anything have happened?
You would have had a lot more of Flying Elephants. I think.
Probably, yeah, probably.
You'd have Flying Elephants until 1929, and then it'd be over.
Yeah.
You know, talkies would come in and they'd go off on their separate way or something. I think absolutely, like, because again, Stan being the genius that he was, but it took him a long time. Like, he was in films like 8-9 years, right, before he figured this out. Right.
That's right.
He wasn't going to get there on his own. You know, and so through collaboration, I don't think Leo McCarey went, "Okay, Stan, you do this, shut up and do it." It's like, let's work it out together, because I think there's a ton of mutual respect there. But it without Leo McCarey, it never would have happened.
No, absolutely right.
It's like sugar daddies forever.
And saying that as well, you could take that a step back, and when you look at, you know, how influential F. Richard Jones was with Stan. So it really was a collaboration. You know, Stan Laurel, the artist, the director, you know, that was a collaboration between all his vaudeville and his musical training with Carno. And then you've got F. Richard Jones's influence as a director and a writer, and then you've got Leo McCarey as a director and a sort of a comedy creator. It all snowballs, doesn't it? And produces this wonderful product, which is Laurel and Hardy. It's just if you take any one of those pieces out, what are we left with? Are we left with the same kind of? And I don't think we are. I think we would be looking at a totally different animal altogether.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's fascinating. It is fascinating.
Tell me that again.
So and then we move from Soup to Nuts, and we've got You're Darn Tootin', or Tootin'. I'm very British, aren't I? Toronto and Tooting.
Tooting.
You're darn tooting, sir. You're darn tooting.
There, do it with the American accent. You're darn tooting.
You're darn tooting. So yeah, and again, I mean, Randy would say that's a pivotal film. That's his Atoll Silent, because this is where we really take a deep dive into the relationship of Laurel and Hardy, where they start with a nice job, they've got digs, they've got money, and suddenly throughout the whole thing they lose everything, but they're left with each other, and they're still happy, and that's great, you know. And that is a really pivotal thing, because the relationship is Laurel and Hardy. You don't have it if you don't have the relationship.
Well, yeah. What could be more symbolic than them walking off wearing the same pair of pants at the end? right? In terms of that, I can't disagree. It's funny because I wouldn't necessarily go there because you're seeing bits of that in Leave 'Em Laughing and that kind of thing, but yeah, it's and you're right. The kind of the downfall of them, because there's the thing with Laurel and Hardy films, they never have a happy ending.
Yeah.
Right, like ultimately the deal is there's no happy ending to everything, right? But they're back again, right? So this idea that they're good enough to be in this band at the beginning, right?
Yeah. How did that happen?
I don't know. Boy, that's a film I wish they did a sound on disc for. I'd love to see that with a really good score, right? I think it's the second Reciprocal Destruction film after Battle of the Century, so
yes, I think you're right.
That idea back in, right? And there's just so many nice touches in that, the thing with Babe counting down, like by stomping his foot, and then Stan would come in, and then Babe would get mad, and then they brought in the drunk stranger, and then he would count them in, but then Babe would put his foot down and he'd be embarrassed and laugh at himself, kind of thing. It's just like beautiful character touches in them throughout.
And I said this on that episode. I spoke with Ben Modell and Neil Brand about You Are Don Tootin because of the musical nature of it. Such a brave film to make as a silent film. I mean, I know they got no other option. There was they couldn't just decide, we'll make this as a silent. But like Leave 'Em Laughing was a really brave film to make because that's all about laughter, and you can't hear the laughter, which is part of the contagious element. Tootin is all about the sound, and like I say, the stamping and the timing and the different gags with the horns and all of that sort of stuff.
I wonder if it was. Yeah, I wonder if it was meant to do that. Because I'm looking at your fine list you put down. It's a couple films later before they get to Habeas Corpus.
Yeah. It's
quite a few.
A little way off yet.
So it might have been a little bit premature, but I wonder if that was the original intent. Because I think Neil Brand, I haven't seen it in a while, but I think he did a really brilliant.
It was an excellent. Yeah, he did a really good soundtrack to it. Yeah, excellent.
And it just elevates that film so much.
Yeah, because I watched when I first wrote an essay on Your Don Tootin. I watched the copy that I've had for years and years. I think it's in the Universal set, and it was all right. I thought, it's okay, but a lot of the gags kind of just missed. And then I remembered the silent. Was it the Silent Clown series, the Paul Merton series that was on BBC, Silent Comedy, I think it was called, and Neil Brand created that soundtrack for that series. And I remembered I'd recorded it, so I went back and found it, and my God, it was such a different film with that. It just shows the importance. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's really, really good. Okay, so we can move on. We can stroll on from Don Tootin. Their purple moment, I think, was a nice comment. I wouldn't say it was a pivotal moment.
First domestic comedy.
Oh yes, of course it is. Of course it is. Yes, you're absolutely right.
First married life.
Yeah. Husbands against wives. Yes, of course it is. Yeah. Should Married Men Go Home kind of follows that theme because obviously Babe's trying to get away from his wife to play golf. I think Should Married Men Go Home is always a little bit disappointing because I think they could have done better with the golf gags. With people like, Stan on board, you think they would have done, because they used to play golf a lot anyway. Yeah. And apparently Stan was always larking around on the golf course. You think they would have had better gags in there with the golf clubs.
Yeah, it seems like it seems like the first film that they just made up as they were going along. Like I don't know if they were tired or behind schedule or something, but it has that really nice intro that they redid in Come Clean.
Yeah.
Has the odd soda thing from Men at War, which kind of really doesn't work as a silent. Yeah. And then once they're on the golf course, it's like, okay, we've got X number of holes, let's do X number of gags at each hole. But
Then let's throw mud
other
at each
than
other.
yeah, exactly, and have flappers fall down in the mud into puddles.
But maybe
because,
actually that's a good point, because maybe because the next film is Early to Bed, which I've talked that film to death. We did 2 episodes on Early to Bed, one with Randy, who doesn't like it, and one with Richard, who loves it. And there's always this huge question in my mind as to why on earth did they go down that, or why did they go so far away from what they were creating with the characters? And maybe, Should Married Men Go Home is a little bit making it up as we go along. Maybe they hadn't really thought we've got some good ideas. So maybe they thought, well, let's get a different director in. Maybe that's a reason for it. They could have thought, let's just try something different, see if we can take them in a different direction. And it just didn't. Well, I don't think it works. So, some people do, some people don't. But that could be.
I like it. I don't mind it so much. I'm not offended by it the way Randy is. It's not like, wow, that's my favorite film. Like Charles Barr and his little. I don't know if you have this book or not. I'm holding.
I do. Yes, I do have that. Yeah.
This is my old ragged '70s copy.
Yeah.
He raves about it, and maybe there's that thing. It's kind of a little bit like the third reel of Laughing Gravy that they cut out. Where it's like, let's explore these characters. It seems, maybe a little bit too trying too hard to be insightful. I'm not sure, but I think Early to Bed was done to use the set with the fountains.
Yes,
because that shows up, X number of years ago in the Mabel Normand short "Should Men Walk Home."
That's right.
Right. They do it way better than Creighton Hale and Eugene Pallette.
Yes.
But it's like, well, we've got this set. We have these round heads that if we paint the hair properly, it's going to look like Hardy, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And let's do that. And I think it was retrofitted. It feels retrofitted to me. Like, how do we get to that so that we're going to have a scene where Stan is hitting Babe on the head? Because you couldn't do the other way around, right? You couldn't have Babe hitting Stan on the head.
No.
Right? And it also works because then Stan's getting his one-uppings too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
But that's my take of it. Like, they might have been a bit like, how many films have we put out this year? Right? Yeah. Like, they do end up doing like 13 films.
Yeah.
And there are a dozen films in 28, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, need a bit of breather. I can't really speak for Emmett Flynn as a director. I know somebody wrote up a lot of stuff about him, but I know little about him.
Yeah.
But I think that it was like literally you need that inspiration. And you see a set.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, there's that set with that fountain.
Yes.
Well, it's a pretty good gag. We can do that better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
But
why are we doing it? Right.
Yeah. It's interesting that they didn't have a single still with the fountain.
That is interesting.
Because I totally agree. That is probably because it only took one little idea for them to create a film around it. With the finishing touch, they see a house being built. Let's build a film around that. So yeah, I would certainly buy that, but then they don't promote it in the film as the part of the film's marketing materials. It's interesting.
Well, you know what? I could be totally wrong. I could be 100% wrong. Like, I have to go back and probably read Randy's chapter on it, because it might be a thing where the film was going totally downhill, and they went, "We need a better ending than this."
Yeah.
What if we did this?
Well, they did. Right? I mean, they did do. Emmett Flynn finished his stint as the director, and then he sort of exited stage left and never to be seen again, certainly at the Roach Studios. And then I think Leo McCarey came in and did about 5 or 6 days of retakes, or certainly a few days of retakes. And I think Randy thinks that it was the ending and the start that McCarey did. So that business on the park bench, which is very Laurel and Hardy, that bit was brought in. And I think the ending as well, because the original ending, the scripted ending, was supposed to be, I think Stan was dragging Babe up some steps and throwing him out the window or something, So that ending was probably, a last minute, hang on, we need something better. Let's grab that bit of scenery that's been filling up the back of that shed for ages.
All right. Well, now you have to edit out my entire assumption about
No, it was good. I liked it
basing the film on that.
I don't know if that's absolutely true. So I think it's a good guess. I like it. It's all good stuff.
Let's get Randy on the phone. Randy will know.
He won't want to talk about Early to Bed again. I'll tell you that.
Randy will talk about anything for hours.
That's true. That's true.
Hey, Randy, we love you.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But anyway, bouncing back from Early to Bed, I mean, they return in some style with two tars.
Mm-hmm.
Fabulous, fabulous. Yeah. And I mean, a lot of people rate Big Business as like the best, and Two Tars is always very, very close behind it. When you hear people talking about it, it's a great show.
Yeah. I don't know what to say about Two Tars that hasn't already been said. What I love about it is both that and Big Business have this. They'll have a little 5-minute lead in before the big battle, right? Yeah. So this has the stuff with the gum machine, which is just delightful.
Yes.
Right. Especially Charlie Hall. Like, I think, is that one of the first times Charlie Hall comes in as a meanie?
He's the landlord in Leave 'Em Laughing, isn't he? But it's one of his sort of his first roles as a meanie. What a great word that is.
Yeah. And he's just great, just because it's like you get Great Big Babe and Little Charlie Hall, right? And Babe's cowering, from this guy, right? So it's I think it's pivotal just in that it puts Charlie Hall in one of his first really strong roles, and you don't really see him in Double Whoopee, right? That's about his next big role there. In The Silence. So he has kind of 3 important roles really in The Silence when you look at it, if you consider Leave 'Em Laughing. He's the pie guy. I take it back, the pie fight in Bella Century. So he has the smaller things. So he's setting the seeds, right? Like as the pieman, right? But just that really nice self-contained. It's like a little 5-minute short.
Yes, it is.
And the same with Big Business, where it's the first 5 minutes are devoted or whatever to just selling trees and it going badly. Fade out and then fade in on Finlayson, right? So it just takes everything about Battle of the Century and You're Darn Tootin' and cranks it up to 11. And there's nothing it doesn't work about it, right?
I love the bit with the gumballs where obviously Babe's coming off worse, so they send Stan into the fray, and he does that little skipping run onto the pavement with you're flirting with death, son.
You won't hear those kind of lines in the talkies.
And then he makes a hash of it. So it's up to is it Thelma Hill? I can't forget the lady's name. Who
I think Thelma Hill, the ex-wrestler.
Rolls up her sleeve, ex-wrestler. That's right. Rolls up her sleeves and sorts him out. I love it. It's just so good. It's really, really good. Yeah, I love it, and just the way that they craft those endings. How it, as with Big Business, it starts really sedately and slowly, and it just builds gradually, and he hits him back, he throws that and hits somebody else, and it just grows and grows and grows to that crescendo at the end. It's super craftsmanship. It's just really, really great.
Well, and also the very specific Laurel and Hardy structure of, okay, you hit me with a tomato. What do I do about that?
Yes,
I'm going to go do this, right? Like it's nothing's a rush. Nobody is fierce. It's like, okay, you're going to play that game, are you?
Right? I'm going to watch you hit my friend and squash that into his face. I'll watch. Oh, you're doing that, are you? Oh, okay, that's good. Yeah.
All right. All right.
We'll have a think about what we're going to do now.
Yeah, exactly.
This is brilliant.
Are you going to stand for that?
Say, listen, if he'd have said one more word to me, I would have... Now let that be another lesson to you.
Say, listen, don't you think you're bounding over your steps?
What do you mean, bounding over my steps? Why, he means overstepping your bounds. Oh. Now let that be a lesson to you.
Oh! And so then we come to another pivotal film. They're all pivotal films. Habeas Corpus.
They are. Yeah.
Habeas Corpus, the first film with the synchronized score.
Yeah. And a good one too.
It is a good one, actually. Yeah. I really enjoyed these episodes with the synchronized scores because I was able for the first time to actually bring in some of the original sound to the podcast. And a lot of the time, well, most of the time, unless you are somebody like Randy, I mean, I don't know how you are with it, Chris, that you are really familiar with those tunes, and you know what the tunes are called, and you know how it relates to the action. I got no idea. I hadn't got a clue. It kind of worked, and it was funny and interesting. But once you know what those tracks are called, it brings a whole new. It's a gag in itself, and you miss so much.
Yeah, there's the term Mickey Mousing, right?
Yeah.
The song that you're playing would be a popular song or a familiar song that plays into, the gag or the action on screen, and yeah, these things are full of them. I'm not like Randy. Or there's another fellow named Richard Finnegan. I don't know if you know him or not, but he knows everything. He has like the, cutting continuities and all the film list or sound music listings for every film.
The cue sheets.
Genius about stuff. All the cue sheets. So thank you for the word. But that there's like, what'll I do with just a photograph? That kind of thing, when Babe's wife leads them and things like that. And there's a lot of that in there, right? Yes. But where'd you get that hat?
Yes, that crops up a lot.
Again. And horses. Like, who knew, right? Like, I remember like hearing those songs years later, going, "Wait, that was a song?"
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. But it is brilliant, and it was so nice to be able to put that in the podcast and to actually say, and we talked about it, we discussed it, and then I played the bit of music, and I think it just shines that spotlight on those tunes and how important they were, certainly to contemporary audiences who probably got the jokes. But today, we miss out on that so much. So yeah, it's lovely to do that. And this is why I'm looking forward to the talkies, because I can bring in the audio, I can bring in Babe's voice and Stan's voice and Finlayson and everybody. It's just going to be hopefully a lot more colourful and fun. I hope.
Well, I like what you've been doing with the Robert Youngson clips.
Oh yeah.
At the beginning, right? Yeah, like to introduce the film. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I wish I'd have done that a lot earlier. It didn't sort of occur to me until quite a few films in. But that, for a lot of people, those were people's gateway into Laurel and Hardy. So they're quite a nostalgic. I've heard from people saying that it's a real nostalgic trip for them to hear that voice. Is it Pete Smith or whoever it is? It does the voice at the start. So yeah, it's the closest thing we have to audio from a lot of the silent films, really. Even though it's not contemporary to the film.
Well, that was definitely my gateway, like the Robert Youngson films, because you couldn't see the silence, right?
Yeah.
And then those would show up on TV every now and then. It was a whole new world.
Yeah, definitely. So we move on to We Four Down, which is pivotal to you because it's one of your favorites.
Yeah, if anyone wants to know my opinion of it, go back and listen to what I did about that.
Exactly.
But a couple things about that is it's got Leo McCarey all over it, right? It's got a great soundtrack, and like you were talking about Leave 'Em Laughing not having the sound of laughter, now it does have the sound of laughter.
Yeah, that's
right,
true.
and which is contagious, right? So an audience laughing along with a film that's laughing already is pretty spectacular. So having that understanding of sound at that point. And but it's weird because I think it's one of those films that, and we can maybe touch on this later. I was wondering what silence wouldn't work as a talkie, and I don't think this one would. And I think it's because the thing at the end with doing the pantomime needs to not have the reality of sound to it.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. You know what I mean? I probably can't articulate that any better than that, but I kind of don't think it would have been like almost any Laurel and Hardy film would work as a talkie, except for Liberty, because the same problem with Harold Lloyd's Feet First, which
that's a good point.
You don't want to hear people, screaming in horror, when they're
constantly. Yeah, that's a good shout. Yeah, that would probably be top of my list. Yeah, I don't think that would work at all as a talkie, but actually works as a bloody brilliant silent film. And it's not a pivotal film, but it's a real standout film, isn't it? Because of the nature of it.
Well, it's the only one like it, right? It's the only high and dizzy I can think of that they did, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we had a little bit of it. We have it in Hogwild, of course, don't we? High and Dizzy.
I think after that you have Nothing But Trouble, but it's rear projection, right?
But Liberty is interesting because we think of it as the outtakes, the pants swapping scene, which I adore. I think that is just so good.
Mm-hmm.
That little bit of risque nature of, oh, I know what you guys are up to,
Yeah,
I just think
the risque innocence of it.
Yes, yeah,
right?
because it
would never occur to these characters.
Yeah,
Stan's really just kind of like, oops, but Babe's really embarrassed. Yes. But it's just about having his pants down. It's not. There's no implication beyond that, right?
Yes, but no, Liberty, great film, and I think the boys really carried off that thrill comedy really well. So I'm glad they didn't do any more of those because I think that would have been too much. Because I think they really milked it in that film. But it wasn't over milked, if you know what I mean. I think if they kept on doing that kind of thing, it would have been a little bit tiresome in the end.
Yeah, it's not their forte.
No,
because you needed the athleticism of Harold Lloyd, right?
Yeah,
because Laurel and Hardy if there's never any bones that these guys are using stunt people.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious, right? The whole reason thrill comedy works is you believe that it's the guy, you believe it's the Harold Lloyd character climbing up, right?
Yeah.
So, it's interesting because Lloyd is going up when he's doing these things, whether it's Last Week first. Stan and Babe are just trying to stay on the same level and go from point A to point B. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But so it doesn't really build. It gets a little bit more absurd.
Yeah.
Along the way, right? But it's just not. Yeah, it's not their forte. It's not where they should be. But and I guess it makes sense that they didn't have the internal logic to go, well, why don't we wait for the elevator to come back?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Because all that happens is the elevator goes down, right? Well, it can come back up, right?
Yeah.
Let's sit here for a while. I guess maybe that's how their brains work. But not really. Yeah, where they belong.
And the Lloyd films, of course, they always had those very clever gags where he would get caught up on something, or something would open unexpectedly and he'd slide back in. All those really kind of original gags which keep that moving a lot. Whereas I think Liberty is a little bit more samey, I suppose. In an affectionate way, because I do love it. I think it's a great film. But it was a one-off, and rightly so, I think. And then we move into Wrong Again, which is lovely because it is very different. I like Wrong Again because it is very, very different. So lots of different gags. And just the whole kind of premise of putting a horse on a piano is ridiculous. And they know it's ridiculous, which I think is genius. Stan's like, no, he didn't say to do that. No. Which is just great.
But apparently I think Everson says something about it being inspired by Shane Andalou. I don't know about that. I'd have to go back and look. I don't think Leo McCarey was watching a lot of French surrealism at the time. He might have been, but it's a brilliant film because it is so absurd.
Yeah.
Right. But again, it's all about the characters, right? The characters accept it.
Yes.
Just like okay, Hardy's got a reason. They're twisted. Right. And it's just a super enjoyable film, and it just has little nice touches. I always like the broken statue.
Yeah.
Right. If you want to talk about risque stuff, right? Just the broken statue, and Stan spending about 3 minutes trying to figure it out. And it's very Harry Langdon in a way, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see when they do that, years later in A Haunting We Will Go. That's just a total throwaway. It's just like, you put it back together wrong, versus giving the star of the film an opportunity to play with the idea, right? That's like the greatest metaphor for the Fox film situation I ever saw.
Yeah. And that's that beautiful moment though, where Babe realizes he's broken it and he's trying to pick the pieces up, but he can't bring himself to pick up the ass. So he take his jacket off and cover it over.
Cover the bum cheek there.
It's just really nice because it says so much about his character in that one little moment. It's just lovely.
It's also probably the most punishing film to Babe, right? It's just like,
oh yeah,
I can't think of anything where he's taken more of of the brunt of things, right?
Yes.
And it is interesting because it's like you can't do that. You couldn't do that to Stan. It couldn't be a thing where Stan's neck is caught, on the leg of the piano. It has to be Babe, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's all character driven. It's great.
Yeah. It's very. I mean, it's brutal on Babe, but I mean, I'm trying to think who I had a conversation with about this one, but there must have been. We've talked about this on social media as well about how they did that piano gag, because that's not resting on Babe's back. There's no way in this world that's resting on Babe's back. So there must have been some kind of cantilevered thing that tipped it up and took the weight and stuff. But just so well done, so well done.
Oh, I'll leave that to people who don't want to just enjoy the film.
We don't need to. But we don't need to know exactly. We don't need to know.
Yeah.
But what is interesting about Wrong Again, I think, as well, is this is a film that when you look at the action between the boys, there's a lot of talking that goes on in that film, and it's almost as if they are really gearing themselves up for the talkies at this point. And I don't know whether that is a conscious thing, but they're having multiple conversations, more than they usually do, and it's just quite an interesting little. Is this a stepping stone here? Are they getting themselves ready to having that kind of dialogue?
It may have been, or I wonder if that was just natural evolution, right?
So from Wrong Again, we have about 5 shorts. That's My Wife, which I love. A number of people, I think it's fairly, mediocre. I love That's My Wife because it's that little risque nature of the dancing scenes, which is just perfect. And then we have Big Business, and again, I've talked Big Business to death because that is just. It's a superb short, isn't it? We did again. I think it was Randy and Richard, and we discussed the Wrong House story from Mr. Roach.
I think it's a good story.
It's a great story, but it does make sense now. And funnily enough, in issue 4 of the Laurel and Hardy magazine, which is coming out in just a few weeks, we are focusing on Big Business. So
excellent.
We'll be covering some of that ground again, and with some wonderful images as well. So if anybody wants,
I'll put that on my holiday list.
Get it on there. Absolutely, it's a great one for Christmas. A good Christmas read.
I'll put it under my Christmas tree that I just bought from those 2 gentlemen. Brilliant. Tore down my front door.
And then we have Double Whoopee, of course. Double Whoopee, I think, is good because it is. I think it is quite different to most other films of theirs. It has just a different feel, but really is quite fresh and good in that respect. I'm just always slightly disappointed by the ending. I think it ends a little bit too cheaply for me. It just tails off a little bit with a bit of a let's have a bit of a a reciprocal destruction type of fight, and that'll do.
It does feel like something if they had more time, they do retakes.
Yeah.
That if it, like we were talking about with Early to Bed, it'd be like, what, let's just come back in a couple of days with a better idea, because it just feels like, okay, all these things are happening, and then and it builds. It's like it doesn't have a story, but it does have momentum. Right. And then at the end, it's like, okay, well, what do we do? And it's just kind of haphazard. So I'm totally with you on that one. Yeah.
Which brings us, and they're great shorts, but I kind of get the feeling with those ones that they're just now eking them out. They're gearing up for the sound, for the talkies. They're not really pushing any boundaries with them. Great shorts, absolutely love. I love Bacon Grabbers especially, is one of my favorites. But it's I just have the sense that they're kind of tailing off. Just getting them out of the way, ready for the talkies.
They're all really different. Like Double Whoopee, you don't really see. I guess it's close to From Soup to Nuts. So it's not
kind of
really overly familiar territory. Bacon Grabbers, I can't really think of anywhere they've got that job to do and they have a confrontation with somebody. So it's a little different. So is Angora Love, but I because it is their first boarding room since Leaving Laughing.
Yes.
But they all feel like they are a bit rushed. They're all great, but I think I know Angora Love, like you said in your intro, is shot in like 6 days or something like that. So So it's a bit of a quickie, but it's not really. You don't feel like it's a tailing off, but it feels like it's a little bit of the same period of their purple moment and Should Married Men Go Home.
Yeah.
Where it's really good, but not great stuff, right? Especially following big business.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose anything from big business feels like it's tailing off, doesn't it? I suppose that's probably slightly unfair to judge it on that basis, really. That's a nice little moment to bring it to a close. And I mean, thank you so much you've spent a lot of time with me over these last few days. And
more than with my wife and dogs.
But it's been a real treat. It's always a treat to chat with you, Chris. It's been great to catch up with you again. And thanks for taking this time with us. It's been lovely to hear the dogs moaning and shaking in the background.
They're
That's
bored.
always a treat as well.
They're bored.
Of course. Well, I'm sure the listeners probably are as well. So
yeah, exactly. We'll hear them moaning in.
At that point, we will call it a day. So thank you so much, Chris. It's been great. And let's not leave it too long before we catch up again.
I'm all, you know how to get a hold of me. I'm always here for you, Patrick.
Wonderful. All the best. Take care.
Take care.
He is a great guy, ain't he?
He certainly is. You know I like him.
I hope you've enjoyed this last look over our shoulders at Stan and Ollie's silent adventures. Thanks so much to our good friend from Toronto, Canada, Mr. Chris Seguin, and that really does round off our coverage of The Boys' silent period, Season 1 and 2023. We've covered so much ground since Episode 1. We've seen Stan and Babe's teamwork and comedy emerge and develop, and their characters and relationship blossom. But this was only the beginning. I do hope you'll join me next year for Season 2 as we explore The Boys' sound shorts. I've got some incredible guests lined up and some fascinating bonus episodes too. You won't want to miss a single one. Don't forget, if you want more podcasts, you can access exclusive episodes by joining me on patreon.com. That's patreon.com. And that includes a range of other benefits as well, most important of which, of course, is showing your support for the podcast and helping to keep it going. Make sure you visit laurelandhardyfilms.com for all the back episodes and also the info on the Laurel and Hardy magazine and our upcoming book releases. And so huge thanks again to our guest Chris Seguin. Thanks to the Bohunks Orchestra for the wonderful music. And thank you to you for listening and for all your support, your messages and your friendship. And until we meet again for Season 2, it's goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
Goodbye from him.
Goodbye.
And a very goodbye from me. Goodbye.